The voice of Husker Nation is on the air. This is Hail Varsity Radio. Insight, opinion, expertise, along with the biggest names talking Nebraska sports. Join in with the show at 402-489-1240 or 1-800-825-5865. Now, here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt and Elijah Herbel.
Welcome to it. Great to be with you on a Wednesday. It's Hail Varsity Radio. We're presented by Currency. For all your equipment financing needs, go Currency. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. We'll get the video stream up here in just a moment. Busy day in the portal for Nebraska. The wrong way. Some names, or at least a name you didn't really expect. A tough day on the recruiting trail on the hardwood for Nebraska via the portal. Hunter Sallis is off to Wake Forest. A thought on that. Mike Babcock going to join us in about 15 minutes or so. We'll check in with Babbers, get his take on some Nebraska football, some spring thoughts as we put a book on that throughout the week. And in hour two, Evan Bland will join us from the Omaha World-Herald, and that'll be pretty exciting to get his take. Some Husker Baseball with Evan as well. And really excited to spend a few minutes with Eric Francis, just a phenomenal photographer extraordinaire with Hail Varsity. Just blessed to have him. Him and Brady Oltmans combined for the Eye Test. It's a podcast we want to tell you about, and Mr. Francis has shot some of the greatest moments in sports involving Big Red action. So we'll talk with Eric Francis coming up here in hour two, and a Jock Doc to put a bow on it. Kawhi Leonard, another knee issue. We'll also dive in. Brett Favre got to hang out with the New York media today. We'll have some comments from Aaron Rodgers. I think I just said Brett Favre. He was asked about Brett Favre going to the Jets. Deja vu for the gang green. Numbers to get in, 489-1240, 489-1240. If you want to join the show on Hail Varsity Radio, can dial us up also, 1-800-825-5865. Always welcome to email the show, chris@hailvarsity.com. And as always, stream the show. Do it that way. If you want to watch the show, the Hail Varsity YouTube channel is one way you can get connected. Hail Varsity Radio at HVarsity Radio. Give that a follow. And KFOR Facebook and Twitter. Find Elijah on Twitter at Herbal Essence. Chris Schmidt at Schmidt_radio. So 3 names in the portal today, Elijah. Let's start there. Sean Hardy, a wide receiver. Braxton Clark, really lanky and tall corner that is no longer with Nebraska. And I don't want to say bombshell. I would not have picked this name or this player as somebody to enter the portal, but I'm not totally surprised about Stephon Wynn. I guess what's more surprising is Stephon Wynn just 2.5 weeks ago, post-practice, said all the right things, and I honestly do believe at the time he probably didn't have any intention on moving on. What happened in the spring game? What happened in that final scrimmage? Don't know. Is he somebody that was looking around? Or, let's be honest, he's a guy that's played at Bama, did a year at Nebraska. There are no bigger commodities in the portal than experienced offensive and defensive linemen. So maybe a change of scenery for a second straight year and a third time overall was music to his ears. A kid that played at a high level at IMG and a kid that ended up in Alabama, just really never got on the field from a starting standpoint. But listen, there's no shame with that because, well, they're kind of cranking out first, second, and third round defensive line picks routinely if you're going to Alabama. But Wynn's a guy, listen, you've got Robinson, you got Nash. Those are 2 guys. And then, Elijah, you saw the youth movement from Nebraska that really that really kind of paid off. Those young guys, I don't know that you're going to lean on them for 4 downs or 3 downs is a better way to put it, but you can sure as heck rely on some of those young guys on 3rd down right now. Just at least you feel good about that, getting after the quarterback. But Wynn's no doubt a big-time loss for Nebraska, and he is a loss because, he's a grown man. He's old. He's experienced. And he's a loss from a standpoint of knowing the SEC and then also knowing a season in the Big Ten. That's not a good thing for Nebraska. The good thing for the Big Red, though, is they still have Ty Robinson, Nash Hutmacher, and some of those bodies. So not good for Nebraska, never good for a program to lose somebody with that much experience. And were you counting on Wynn as one of these guys to have a breakout year? He had 22 tackles a year ago. Could you see him doubling that this next season? Could you see him as a guy that could play 30, 35, 40 snaps for you? Matt Rule wants that hockey line change type rotation. Maybe that was a bit of a detriment to sticking around Nebraska.
And based on what I saw in the spring game, I thought Wynn was a guy that was going to be your second string nose guard behind Nash Hutmacher. That was going to be your 1-2 punch at nose, if you will, where Nash is your first guy, and then you have a rotational piece of Wynn. I thought Wynn was going to fit well into that role based on what I saw, because like on Monday, I was just saying how, well, maybe I was being a little bit alarmist with the depth along the defensive line, talking so much about it this spring. I was like, all right, I liked what I saw from the defensive line, and now we're right back to that same conversation. One guy leaves, and who does Nebraska have behind Wynn at nose guard? Maybe Ty Robinson. I think Ty Robinson might be
Nash.
I think Ty might be more of that type to go on the strong side defensive end, quote unquote, where you line him head up on the tackle. I don't know, maybe this does move him back into nose guard. Maybe this is Wynn seeing the writing on the wall, saying, well, once Ty comes back, he's going to be that second string nose guard. I don't know exactly where Ty Robinson's going to go within this defense, so that's where the question remains. But if Ty's going to be a guy that's that 3-3-5 defensive end on the strong side with the tight end, where you still have the outside backer outside of you, leaves a big hole behind Nash Hutmacher at nose guard. So I think how much this hurts depends on where Ty Robinson ends up playing, and I think where Ty Robinson ends up playing probably depends on what kind of development you get out of guys like Linhart and Princewell and A.J. Rollins. Those are the guys that would be filling in that role if Ty does in fact slide inside. But there's a lot of moving pieces within that defensive line that I still think remains to be settled. So seeing Wynn head out the door create some concerns whenever we've already had issues with the depth along the defensive line. You lost
Rodgers a year ago, okay? And with Nebraska, good comment from Brian there that was up there on the stream, and that is Wynn's departure hurts depth-wise for sure, more so when it comes to situational four-man front, short yardage, goal line, all of that. No doubt Wynn's forte, you would think, based on his size and ability, is more of that run stuffer than pass rusher, although, I mean, the guy has all the tools to collapse the interior.
He's a big body
of that pocket. He's a big dude. And it sounded like this spring he hit it off with pot roast. So, tough news. Braxton Clark, listen, Braxton Clark's a guy who gave a lot of time and effort and energy to Nebraska football. California kid, 6'4" corner. I mean, just giant, just big. And he's a guy that saw some time, saw plenty of snaps, but never really broke through as a starter. Tyler jumps in. Also, a little bit of a comment on Wynn. I can fill in for Wynn. I'll get in shape for $1 million in NIL checks. Hey, you're all good there with the million, right? I like that. That's pretty good. But no, that's the other thing. Wynn could have dipped his toe into the NFL because of his size and body type. I don't know that he's at best maybe a 6th or 7th round guy, but he came back because presumably the NFL was not as good of an opportunity for sure to make a squad, or I don't know the NIL situation, but Nebraska got him from Bama a year ago. Wynn did pretty well, you would think, with NIL opportunity already here in Lincoln. And maybe it's time to cash in one more time somewhere else. I mean, they'll have a line out the door for him.
Yeah, maybe you, as we said last week on this show, kind of tongue-in-cheek, maybe you go take care of that 401k for the rest of your life here with one last NIL.
You already started it here.
Well, and
you just add to it.
And a guy I knew during my time at UNL, he spent a lot of time covering Texas recruiting for On3 over the past couple of years. Tim Verghese is his name. He said that a lot of teams had their heads turned by what Wynn did in the spring game just on Saturday, and he didn't think that there'd be any shortage of options for where Wynn can go end up. So there could be a lot of options here. Maybe you made some strides in the past year, and hey, you want to get your last year of college closer to home. You want your family to be able to see you. That could be a possibility here. Maybe you see the writing on the wall and you see, well, Nash is the number one guy or Ty Robinson's the number one guy, and I'm going to end up either second or third here, and I'm still not going to get the kind of snaps that I want, and I want to get some play time for the end of my college career. I feel like now whenever you look at this situation, what's most surprising is he's already had his transfer to Nebraska, and he was here for a year. I think whenever you look at opportunity and what a lot of college football players are looking for towards the end of their college football career, which is to get on the field and have a chance for your family to go watch you and have all that hard work pay off for you, I think it's a little bit less surprising, but that doesn't take away from how much this could potentially hurt. But on the flip side of things, opens up a spot for Nebraska to potentially go find a different defensive lineman in the portal, a guy that's handpicked by a guy in Coach Knighton that can come in and be that 1 year stopgap. That's potential. I mean, just today, within the past hour, Omaha West Side standout Avante Dickerson's entered his name into the transfer portal from Oregon. So it's difficult in the moment to not look at the transfer portal as a one-way street, like, oh man, Wynn's on the way out. That's it for Nebraska's D-line depth. For all we know, Nebraska could be going and getting 2 or 3 more defensive linemen out of the portal, and obviously there's scholarship numbers that need to be accounted for there. But welcome to the transfer portal era, folks. This is going to be standard with guys that you thought were going to be on your 2 deep hitting the transfer portal 3 months before the season.
All right, we're going from football to hoops. Hunter Sallis, it was down to 2. Wake Forest and Nebraska. Wake Forest wins out. Listen, Wake Forest, a really incredible basketball history. Chris Paul, Tim Duncan, Rodney Rodgers, Randolph Childress. Those were some really fun teams. Having a chance to visit Winston-Salem. Listen, nice people, wonderful school. I will pass on living in Winston-Salem versus Lincoln, Nebraska. That being said, it's the ACC, and you know what? I think about style of play first, and I think the way Nebraska is going to continue to make headway in the Big Ten is what you saw last year. It's not fun and gun. It's not high tempo. It's not pace and space. It is gearing up and being gritty defensively. That's going to be how you survive and maybe advance up the ladder in the Big Ten. Fred knows that. And if you're Hunter Sallis, all well and good with what Fred's done with Banton and McGowan with the NBA, but just I think he'll have a little potentially more offensive freedom at Wake Forest. Here's the bottom line. I was talking to a couple of coaches that have been around the college and high school basketball game for a lot of years, and right now Nebraska has got to prove it. Nebraska has got to prove it on the court. They've got to show it in the Big Ten standings. And right now, if you're a Metro kid, you're going to try and go to Creighton. And you're going to try and get to Creighton if you don't originally go to Creighton, if you're going to come back home. Mm-hmm. And thirdly, great. I'd love to believe it can get done or that it'll be okay in Lincoln. But I haven't seen it. And Nebraska has not done well, first and foremost, this recruiting cycle in the portal with getting that point guard. I think Sam McEwen wrote 0 for 4, and he ain't wrong. Secondly, Nebraska has not done well with Nebraska kids. You didn't get Trout. Chucky's still at Wisconsin. Chucky's incredible. And Hunter is off to Wake Forest. If you're Nebraska, you just got to hope that in future years, Fred and company have a good next season and, listen, make some headway and show that they can get into March in the NCAA tournament, not just from a job security standpoint, but just show that progress to other prospects around the country. There's a lot of Metro kids that were looking around, and Nebraska was under consideration, but wasn't the choice. They chose to go elsewhere, and that is a kick below the belt. But you cannot blame these kids for going to places they think have a better ceiling. And right now, Nebraska, until they do it, they're going to keep losing out to Creighton, in-state prospects, and they're going to keep losing out to kids that are back on the other end from the portal, and they'll pick other options. Sam Griesel was a nice get. That was a little bit of a showcase how a hometown kid could come back and do well. That's just one, though. Unfortunately, Creighton right now has been so good at nailing those recruiting ties, developing kids, and they had the cherry on top with an Elite Eight run, and that is front and center of those Metro kids, whether they go there initially or come back on the transfer end.
Well, I mean, what's the selling point for Nebraska right now here with the last 30 seconds of our segment?
I'm Fred Hoiberg, and I can get you to the NBA.
It's if you're the best player on our roster, I can get you to the NBA. You're not going to win many games here. If you want to win games, go up to Creighton, but I can get you to the NBA. Might be a second-round pick, but I'll get you to the NBA. That's the selling point right now. And
Hunter's gone to the tournament.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he's won. This was all about kind of expanding his game, which to me would be kind of a wheelhouse thing for Fred. But, hey, Wake Forest, great basketball history, ACC. Mike Babcock going to join us. We'll talk some spring football with him, get his take on Hunter. Hail Varsity continues.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Thoughts from Aaron Rodgers coming up as he was in the Big Apple. Also, what is happening with Husker Baseball tonight and this weekend. We welcome in Mike Babcock with HailVarsity.com and magazine at MD Babs on Twitter. Babbers, we'll start off. Do we have any confetti, at least in your football office? Coach Prime is going to give all those kids he's kicked out access to their practice film.
Good for him. There's
right?
Several of them he can't name. I read somewhere.
Same here. As much as a public beating he's taken the last 18 hours, good for him relenting. That's not like Dion to backtrack. He's been great at backpedaling, but not necessarily a full backtrack.
Yeah, that's true. He's got a plan. I don't know if it's going to work long range. That's his decision. Well, I think it's a little bit unusual what's happened there, but is what it is, right?
Mike Babcock is in his own darkness retreat right now. I love it. If you're watching on the video.
Avoid the ayahuasca, Mike.
Maybe I should turn on the light in here.
You're all right, man. It's story time with Babbers. I love it. So
I think we're sitting around the campfire.
I know, right? Mike, let's spend a minute here. You mentioned Dion's plan. What do you think succeeded so far this spring with the rule plan as we put a bow on spring ball?
Well, I think that, when you look at the transfer portal, I kind of wonder about some of the guys that are, specifically you talked about Wynn leaving. I think that the spring was good from the standpoint of getting players to connect with each other. I think it's a very close-knit team at this point. I think that was part of what he wanted to accomplish. I think he accomplished that. We've said this before, but I think that they feel like they're a part of the community. They're involved in the community. I think that's important. It was difficult for me, the spring game, was difficult for me to draw many conclusions there because, I thought the defense played pretty well. That's always something that has been what Tom Osborne always said was the defense was always a little bit ahead of the offense when you start spring practice and when you start fall camp. And it was a little concerning, I guess, that you would have 8 fumbles in the game, 6 of which were lost. But on the other hand, what does that a credit to the defense, how the defense played. So I just, I don't know what to say beyond spring is always a time for optimism everywhere. We'll see what happens in the fall, but I feel good about what I saw in the spring, not necessarily on the field, but the connection between coaches and players, and the accessibility to the media, which I felt was a way to connect to the community. That if you can connect with the media, you can connect with the community. And I think that was an important thing, that we had the availability that we did, ability to talk to players, ability to talk to coaches on a consistent basis. I thought that was really important. So I feel good about it. But again, this is the time of year where you feel good about things usually, and it can change in a hurry, I'm sure. But I don't think that it will. I think that we'll feel good about things by the end of fall camp, where this team is at, and the potential to at least go 500, 6-6, and get into a bowl game.
Mike Babcock is with us here. It's Hail Varsity Radio. And Mike, you mentioned the fact that spring's a time for optimism. If that's true, then I guess late April and early May is a time for doom and gloom with the transfer portal opening up. And I want to get your take on what we saw from the defensive line. It's a position group we've talked about a decent amount this spring with how thin it was there. And I feel like some of those concerns for me were alleviated during the spring game, seeing what some of those newcomers and youngsters were able to do there. But then it comes right back with the news that Wynn has entered his name into the transfer portal. So how do you feel that Nebraska is at that position right now? Do you think they're going to be fine without Wynn, or is that a place where they might need another transfer portal addition or two as the summer rolls on?
Well, I was surprised like you guys were about Wynn. That to me was a shock. I thought he was going to be a starter. He had some experience. You can't count that out. He's a senior. You don't figure he's already transferred once, and going into his senior year, is he going to stick around? I figured he was. Now, the young guys, Princewell, as I said, I'm still trying to learn how to say his last name. So
it's all right, Babbers.
Princewell, Lenhart, A.J. Rollins, I think they look at him as a guy that could be in the defensive line. Gunnarsson is a guy that could be up front. You got Robinson, you got Hutmacher. They've got some guys there, and, transfer portal, yeah, but one of the things that you look at is they still were at a position where they needed to cut the roster of scholarship players by a dozen or so players. So, can you get that accomplished so that then you could bring in maybe somebody else if that's what you think you need to do. But right now, I don't know if they've got it down there to where it needs to be. The couple of quarterbacks left, right? Smothers is in the transfer portal. Torres is in the transfer portal. That surprised me a little bit. But I haven't seen as many names. You mentioned Braxton Clark, Alontae Brown.
You got Hardy, wide receiver.
Yeah, okay. So you still got to get down to that number so that you're at 85. Did we decide that it has to be at the end of fall camp or before fall camp?
At the start of fall camp.
Start of fall
camp. So there's still guys that have to leave before Nebraska can look at bringing in people from the portal if that's a priority defensive line.
And I believe the number from our friend Mitch Sherman was that Nebraska currently sits 7 over. I believe they're at 92 following the guys into the portal today.
Yeah, Mike, okay. I want to, not that this can happen, but if there's a situation for Smothers where, you know what, maybe it's just best to stay. It sounded like Logan could come back. But if you had to pick and go with a third quarterback right now, in what we think a Matt Rule offense would be, I might lean towards Smothers. I know Harburg had better practices we didn't see than spring game. I know Chubba is uber athletic, but sometimes still has trouble taking care of the football interception-wise. And I've seen three good quarters of Logan running an offense where they used his legs and did what he could do throwing the football. I don't know. I think if I had to pick a third quarterback right now that I feel comfortable with a Terminator, emergency phone call, it might be Logan versus what the rest of that room looks like.
Well, yeah, possibly, but I think they feel good about Haarberg and how he can develop.
Sure.
Because of his size and his speed, his ability to be that third guy, and it's not going to be immediate that you're probably going to need that third guy. You're still going to have that competition between Sims and Thompson in fall camp to see who's going to be the starter. So I kind of thought Smothers would be one of the guys that would decide to leave. That he probably feels like he's not going to be among the top two. He's not going to be in that competition, and so he was maybe going to look at something else. That's probably to his advantage to look around and see what he can find. But if you're talking about a third guy right now, I think that they feel good about Haarberg and the potential to develop him into that third guy. And Purdy, I suppose is in that mix too. But I really think that they felt good about Haarberg.
Mike Babcock's with us here at Hail Varsity Radio. And Mike, while we talk about the backfield coming out of spring, based on what your eyes saw and what we've heard from the coaching staff, who do you think the top two running backs are as we approach summer and in fall camp? Because I think it was Anthony Grant who had the lion's share of the touches on Saturday. Gabe Irvin had the touchdown and looked all right as well. So is that your top two guys? That seems to be who I think the top two guys are coming out of spring football. But I want to get your take, what you saw. Yeah,
I do, Elijah. I think that's going to be a competition in fall camp to see which of the two is going to be the starter. Grant was the leading rusher last year. He had about 900 yards, I think, but he had 600 of those early in the season and then kind of tapered off a little bit. The guy that I think they need to find a place for is Ramir Johnson. There's a guy that he competes. He does whatever he's asked to do. I'm not necessarily saying that he's going to be competing as the starting quarterback, or starting quarterback, sorry. The phone just rang there and I had to get it off of there. The starting running back, but, I think they need to get him in the mix somehow, whether it's as a flanker, running back sometimes when they have a couple of them or whatever. You're going to have a fullback in there at some point. So that's kind of the way I look at it. Is going back to your question, those two guys, running back, I think that's going to be the competition. Those are going to be the top two guys.
Mike, 30 seconds, real quick. I've got the issue in hand right now. Tell me about the latest from Hail Varsity Magazine.
Well, I think we've got some good. Trying to think what specifically I would point out. I think everything in there is pretty good. I really like the photography. The images I think are really something special, and there's some good breakdown there. I think Brandon has some good breakdown stuff. He's always good at that. That's always a significant thing.
Pretty good feature too on the Big Ten quarterbacks, the moves that have gone on in the Big Ten, and good stuff.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was referring to, as a breakdown of what he did there.
NIL stuff too.
Pretty good, yeah.
Babbers, we'll say thank you as always, my friend. We'll get caught up next week. Appreciate your time.
I'll try to get some light.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Thanks for spending time. It's Hail Varsity Radio. We're presented by Currency, Schmidt and Elijah Herbel. Big thanks to Mike Babcock. Get that interview. Spotify, iTunes, Google Play is where you can check the one-on-one interviews or segments you like, get the whole show. Spotify, iTunes, Google Play. Also, the Hail Varsity YouTube channel has the video version, and the replay also posted the Hail Varsity Radio Twitter handle at HVarsity Radio. Coffee and Cream, Damon Benning in the morning, 7 to 10. We take you home from 4 to 6. Evan Bland on the way in about 25 minutes, and then we'll also get a Jock Doc. Aaron Rodgers is off to New York. And how many Jet fans do you know?
Personally?
Yes.
2.
Okay, same here.
Yeah, I know one that was actually, God bless him, born in the state of New Jersey, so he was born into it. And then another who, for some reason, chose to be a Jets fan. I think that was back in the Mark Sanchez years when they actually had a decent running game and were making the playoffs and doing well. So 2 Jets fans, one who is actually somewhat diehard, the other one just a little bit.
Yep, Mike Sauter is a Jets
I guess
fan.
Make it 3. I do know Mike.
And then our dear friend Gary Novotny from Gary Michaels. But he goes all the way back to Joe Willie Namath. And the guarantee, right? Super Bowl III. I hope, I haven't asked Novot this ever, if it was the guarantee when he was a kid, you're finding that sports fandom, or if it was Joe Willie pulling off the fur coat, fashion-wise. So let's hear from Aaron Rodgers as he was introduced to the New York media. Quick little NFL thought. This got done as the draft is tomorrow. We'll check in with Jeremiah Searles, get his take on not only spring football, but some of the folks he's representing, because Searles will have 7, 8 guys that he represents. Some of them will hear their name. Some will sign on the dotted line as preferred free agents. But Aaron Rodgers had officially got done number 8 in that gang green.
Are you supposed to shake my hand? Yeah. I want to say thank you to Christopher and Woody for bringing me here. Obviously, Coach Saleh, Joe Douglas, my agent, Dave Dunn. This is a surreal day for me. After spending 18 years in the same city, it's been a lot of introductions today and meeting a lot of people, but there's a lot of excitement. I'm here because I believe in this team. I believe in Coach Saleh. I believe in the direction of Joe Douglas. Obviously, he's drafted really well the last couple of years, having the offensive and defensive rookie of the year. But big thanks to the Jets organization. Obviously, a big thanks to the Green Bay Packer organization for an incredible run. That chapter is over now, and I'm excited about the new adventure here in New York.
So what attracted you to New York, Aaron Rodgers? Why pick the Big Apple? Why pick that team in the Big Apple?
Well, they smoked us last year, so I knew they had a good team. We got to practice against them a couple years ago, and I got to get to know Robert a little bit more. And I've always loved what he's all about. We played him in San Fran a few times, and mostly they got the best of us. But I liked the way that he was leading, his coaching style. A big reason I'm here, I got to mention, is Nathaniel Hackett, who's here. Hack and I became really close friends for 3 years in Green Bay, and I love him like a brother, and I believe in him, and I'm really happy to be back working with him again. Obviously, Joe has got a great track record so far of drafting some incredible players, but it takes a system, and obviously Robert has the right sauce, so I'm excited about getting to work with him and Brick and Mark Kwan, former teammate of mine, and it's a great staff. But I'm an old guy, so I want to be a part of a team that can win it all. And I believe that this is a place we can get that done.
And Schmitty, one thing he didn't mention there is just how low of a bar he has compared to other former Packers quarterbacks who have gone off to the Jets. Like, make the playoffs. That's goal number one, because Favre, if you remember, I think lost his last 2 or 3 games at the end of the regular season to miss the playoffs.
They finished. They were sitting pretty to go to the playoffs, and then they didn't. Favre needed a buffer spot to land before he could go back to Minnesota to try and beat Green Bay, because he wanted to stick it to Green Bay. Contractually, he couldn't go. He had to go somewhere in the AFC, and while in New York, they kind of floundered towards the end. Yeah, the infamous photo
Yeah, I was going to say the bar is make the playoffs, don't send any lewd photos to reporters, and then 10 years after your career, don't embezzle millions out of the Mississippi welfare system.
Alleged.
Oh, yeah, sorry. We don't want to get sued a la Pat McAfee.
Sure. So let's talk title drought because, well, your grandfather might remember when the Jets won it.
I mean, it's exciting. The Jets have an incredible, passionate fan base. I saw that last year at Lambeau. Obviously, you know about Fireman Ed and his passion for the team. I think that's an exciting draw to this as well, as being a part of something special. I grew up watching old VHS tapes of the Super Bowls, and so obviously I know about the guarantee and Broadway Joe. Been a while since then. I noticed walking in this morning that Super Bowl III trophy is looking a little lonely. So.
Well played. Well played. He mentioned 2 or 3 times his darkness retreat and why come out of retirement. I mean, he still has game left. He wanted to play till he's in his 40s. He doesn't have that many miles on him, comparatively speaking. I know he's had some injuries he's dealt with. I know that he hasn't had the success he's wanted, just one Super Bowl. He's got a boatload of MVPs. He's still great. He still can play at a high level. But the dude needed a change of scenery. Favre and the Jets, deja vu, the New York media asked, is it weird that you're kind of following that same path as Brett Favre, also following Favre in Green Bay?
Ryan Dunleavy from the New York Post.
Hi, Ryan.
Hi. There's certainly a sense of deja vu here with a Packers icon coming to the Jets. I'm wondering, I don't know what your relationship is with Brett, if you guys talked at all about this and any idea of what to expect here, and then was there any hesitation on your part, I guess, making the same exact jump that the guy you've been compared to your whole career made?
Well, he had a legendary career. It is very ironic that our paths have kind of taken another step in the same direction. Brett and I, over the years, had talked about this transition and what it was like. But that was a different coaching staff, different GM, different circumstances. I'm excited about the opportunity to work with these guys and my new teammates and the coaching staff. But nice pictures there. Good job. But we haven't talked specifically about this opportunity.
Let's get real. We're talking reckoning. Can we squeeze in cut 10? Maybe?
No, let's save it for next.
Okay,
segment.
So the reckoning part, it's not just, all right, you won a title in iconic Green Bay. And let's not confuse the Jets with the Giants. The Giants are New York's team. But the Jets are still in that top media market, okay? So we'll hit a little bit of that iconic legacy if you were to bring a title to New York. Good luck in the AFC. And we'll have more thoughts on Hunter Sallis. Hail Varsity continues. We'll wind down hour 1.
And now,
back to Hail Varsity Radio.
One final time this hour, it's Hail Varsity Radio. We're presented by Currency for all your equipment financing needs. Go Currency. Numbers to get in, 489-1240, 489-1240. You can log on and fire off an email as well, chris@hailvarsity.com. Reminder, to get buckled up, one of every 3 fatal crashes in Nebraska involves an alcohol-impaired driver. Why take chances? If you drink, don't drive. A message from the Nebraska Department of Highway Safety Office. Kent emails in, the New York Jets were good under Sanchez. Maybe I missed something. ? I think Sanchez, did they go to the playoffs with him? Maybe AFC?
They made it to the AFC Championship game and lost. I never said they were bad.
No, I'm just saying, I think Sanchez he got into the playoffs. Was Pennington getting them to the AFC as well? Because I think they drafted Sanchez to replace Pennington because he had the shoulder issues.
I don't think Pennington took him as far as Sanchez because it was Sanchez's first year when they brought in Rex Ryan.
They had Rexy Ryan. I mean, the defense was good. They had DeBrickashaw Ferguson.
The running game was like
elite.
What we think of the Titans from 2 years ago. Like, that's what the Jets were back then.
Or the Titans with Eddie George.
Yeah, either way you want to put it. It's like their running game took them very far, and it made Mark Sanchez look a little bit better than he was. Like,
and then the butt fumble happened.
I was going to say, that New York Jets team was like, if they had a top 10 quarterback on their roster, that was a title-winning team with how good the defense was, with how good the offensive line and the running game was. I mean, Mark Sanchez with that team, I believe, was above a 60% passer and was like top 5 in the NFL in stats.
Then he did the gratuitous Speedo shoot for GQ, pissed off the locker room, and now he can be seen on Fox doing color commentary. Let's talk legacy. Wayne Chrebet, Brendan Bora chimes in from South Dakota. Wayne Chrebet for sure. Was he Hofstra? Is that right? Was Chrebet a Hofstra guy?
I don't know who Chrebet is.
Chrebet's their little tiny, tough dude slot guy. All right.
Wayne Chrebet.
Yeah, Google Wayne Chrebet. You are young. Dion is not happy about NIL in Nebraska. We got to get this in here. Where the heck's our NIL and boosters? Are we supposed to be buying the players we need? Dion not happy about the Hunter Sallis decision. Look, you're just not going to roll the dice with Nebraska basketball, unfortunately, right now, if you're an in-state kid. Back to legacy. Favre had it in Green Bay. Rodgers followed, created his own. Can he create an iconic legacy in the top media market and NFL kingdom where the Jets are second banana?
Aaron, Ian O'Connor, HarperCollins. Hey, Aaron. Just wondering, there's obviously been a lot of conversation about how you can elevate the Jets, but you mentioned legacy earlier. What do you think winning a championship for a New York franchise that hasn't won one in decades would do for your historical standing in the sport?
Well, I mean, I don't really know about the historical standing in the sport. I think more from this organization standpoint, it'd be really special. There's some iconic names that have played here, probably none more iconic than number 12. And I heard what he said about unretiring his number, but to me, 12 is Broadway Joe, and I didn't want to even go down that path, and I'm excited about going back to my college number. But there's something special about playing in a city for a team like this. With a storied franchise, and obviously going way back to Super Bowl III, to be a part of something special would definitely help you go down in the history of an organization. Already have 18 years in an incredibly iconic organization, and it'd be fun to be a part of the history of this one as well.
The voice of Husker Nation is on the air. This is Hail Varsity Radio. Insight, opinion, expertise, along with the biggest names talking Nebraska sports. Join in with the show at 402-489-1240 or 1-800-825-5865. Now, here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt and Elijah Herbel.
Back into it at Hail Varsity Radio. We're presented by Currency. For all your equipment financing needs, go Currency. Evan Bland with us here to get hour 2 kicked off. At Evan Bland, OWH on Twitter is where you follow him, read him with the World Herald. Evan, busy week. Thanks for a few minutes. How you doing?
Hanging out. Yeah, I'm not in the portal right now, so I'm still with the World Herald.
That is good, man. Awesome. No portal for Evan. We're happy for you, but man, a bit of a shock. Let's just start off with Stefan Wynn, as he's a guy that saw plenty of progress, you'd have to think, this spring, but evidently not enough, as he's portaling.
Yeah, I mean, he's one of those guys who I don't know what maybe the intention or the thought was there, if that was more from the coach's side or from his side. But you think back to the 15 spring practices and the guys that we as media got to talk with afterwards. He was one of them a couple weeks ago, and he was pretty thoughtful and reflective about his journey from Alabama to Nebraska and about why he didn't turn pro this offseason and take his chance at the NFL. He felt like he had room to improve his stock, like he had left something on the table that he could show and move forward on this season. And so obviously something changed in those 2 weeks, but I didn't get the vibe a couple weeks ago that he was somebody who would want to move on, but he's got 1 year left, and we'll see where he ends up. But you think about Nebraska's defensive line and what they've already lost, either to graduation or other transfers, or somebody who really appeared to be in line for a bigger role this season, certainly would have been in the rotation. Now, I know he wasn't with part of the first team defensive line at the spring game last weekend. We saw guys like Prince Will Umen-Mielen and Cam Lenhart in those roles out there. I think, you kind of project forward, it'll be Ty Robinson and Nash Hutmacher and, a couple other guys. But yeah, there's no doubt. Like, I think that's sort of become part of the portal cycle now. Every year is you're going to get the guys that you probably expect to leave, and you're probably going to get a surprise or two every year as well. And I think Stephon Wynn definitely qualifies as that latter category.
Evan Bland with us, Hail Varsity Radio. Evan, let's go to that defensive line. That was some of the oohs and ahs. This last Saturday was not only how well the defense performed with TFLs and the turnover side of things, but just that youth movement, and it was speed that maybe we hadn't seen for a while from the defensive side. MJ Sherman was fantastic as well. But do you chalk that up to Nebraska doing a good job of evaluating and getting some young kids like Princewell and Lenhart and even Mav Noonan on the field and seeing that, hey, maybe they are ready. They don't need a little time to develop versus it being an offensive line issue? Where's the scale at for you? Is it more about the kids that came in that are pretty high level, or did it speak to you about the offensive line being still that work that they are?
Well, I mean, yeah, I think it's definitely some of both. It's an interesting discussion because I think you think about like 2 months ago, the discussion with the defensive line was, man, do they have enough bodies to put out there that you feel trustworthy and that can go out and take care of things? And now I think what we heard throughout the spring, what we saw in the scrimmage was, yeah, they did identify some young prospects. All the guys that you mentioned that we're talking about have bright futures at Nebraska. Now, I think you have to temper that, though, and say that does not mean that those guys are ready to go perform over the course of a full season and handle the rigors of the Big Ten. You're going to get Ty Robinson back. Nash Hutmacher is going to play a big role. Guys like MJ Sherman, who are physically advanced and older guys, are going to get steady chances and steady snaps. I think early on, a guy like Prince Will and Lenhart, I mean, those are guys who are probably third down type players right now. Rushing situations, you bring them out there, hopefully in a year or two when they've gone through the nutrition and the strength training spots where maybe they can be every down players. That's no knock on them. I mean, that's just the reality of Big Ten football to take. So I think if you're Nebraska, you'd be well advised to allow them to play some and have them be contributors this season. But, again, I think if you get into November and you're playing Wisconsin and Michigan and Iowa in consecutive weeks or close to it, like that's going to be hard to hold up if you're 6'3", 220 pounds. It's just sort of the reality of the situation. So I think you can be encouraged by the players that they brought in and for what the future can be, and even a little bit what the present can be. But I don't think you can go too far overboard as to what those guys are right now, just because, again, the physical demands moving forward, history would tell you it's going to take some time.
Evan, it's a grown man's league, despite some guys that are coming in really gifted. You nailed it. It's tough to survive a year in the Big Ten and find some roles for those guys that they can do and do well, and then keep giving them a little more responsibility as it warrants. But, excitement for some of the flashes you saw with the young pups. Back to the portal for a minute. Braxton Clark, I saw your tweet earlier today, and you look at Braxton Clark, part of the 2018 class for Scott Frost's first class, that transition class. That means you've got about every kid in that 2018 class has moved on. Braxton, man, what a physical specimen, what a gifted athlete, but a guy that just didn't really see extended time. He'd get in for snaps for sure, but never really broke through to get that other starting corner spot.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I think he saw action in more than 30 games. He always stood out for his height. I mean, he was 6'4", especially at a corner. I mean, that's massive. And so he had his moments, and kudos to him for sticking around. I mean, he's going to he has his degree, and he saw a lot of things at Nebraska. And so, yeah, I mean, he's the last player to leave in that first transition class of 2018. That's obviously not an indictment on anything, right? I mean, he would have been a sixth-year senior, and other guys have gone on to play professionally or transfer or just finish football or what have you. It's just sort of I thought it was just sort of noteworthy that it closes the book on that particular chapter of Nebraska history. And so in a lot of ways, he was emblematic of the Frost era. I mean, he was from California. He was a taller guy. That was something that staff prioritized. There was potential there, and it just never necessarily translated into an every down sort of situation or role for him. But I think you give him credit for the time that he did put in at Nebraska. And now this is sort of that moment when the roster trimming continues. There's still probably, roughly 8 scholarship players over that 85-man limit where they need to be by fall camp. And you figure a lot of that's going to happen this week with players being able to enter their name in the portal through Sunday. So, Braxton Clark sort of gets caught up in the mix with that. I think you salute him, you say farewell and best of luck. And, I think that's just kind of the transactional nature of what college athletics is right now.
Evan, going to go to the spring game. Your takeaway with Sims at quarterback and the quarterback room overall. We know Smothers is off to the portal, as is Torres. That leaves, for now, as we speak, Purdy and Harburg and Casey and, of course, Sims. Did Sims wow you?
I felt like he needed to be the best quarterback that you saw pretty clearly, and I think he was. I think his decision-making, the accuracy of his throws, his running ability, all of that, to me, stood out and reaffirmed that Nebraska has, once again, found someone out of the portal that can be a starter for them moving forward. I think that's what you needed to see. Purdy took a little bit of time to get going, as he tends to do. Harburg had his moments. I thought that pass that he threw deep to Betts in the corner of the end zone probably could have been a touchdown if he had identified and made that throw a couple beats sooner. And then, of course, Casey Thompson not playing, but very much, I think, still in the mix based on who he is, his sort of nature as a football junkie, the respect that he earned from his teammates last year. So to me, I think when you look ahead to the fall, it shapes up as a pretty clear 2-man race between the guy who did it last year and the guy who's aiming to do it this year. But yeah, I thought on Saturday, Sims looked the part. I think his demeanor suits what this staff likes to do. He's very even keel, very objective, I think, in his thinking and in his reads and what you see from him on the field. So probably the best case scenario for Nebraska was the guy that they handpicked, that this staff handpicked to come in and contend to be a starter. He looked that part. So I think that was probably a win.
Evan Bland with us, few minutes. It's Hail Varsity Radio. Evan with the World Herald at Evan Bland, OWH on Twitter's where you can follow him. You read him with the World Herald. Evan, last thought on football. Dion in Colorado, it is a turnstile there. Are they going to be able to get enough offensive and defensive linemen for September 9th?
Well, somebody will be out there. Whether it's the guys that they want remains to be seen. But yeah, I think the number is beyond 40 now that have entered the portal since Dion arrived in Colorado a few months ago. And yeah, it's going to be really fascinating. And it's so interesting from our perspective in Nebraska too, Chris, because obviously those two teams are going to play in early September. That's Deion's home debut, but it's also, I think, a really interesting parallel between two different ways to approach a roster rebuild in the portal era, because, again, Nebraska and Colorado have first-year head coaches. And the way that Matt Rule approached it, is quite a bit different. He did not want to run guys off. He wanted to take them through the spring and see what happens. He wanted to maybe experiment with guys and try them in different spots. I mean, we saw Tommy Hill move back to DB. We've seen Jannara and Bonner go from receiver to this kind of hybrid tight end fullback sort of role. Nebraska is still going to have to trim at least 8 more players. That'll put them, I'm doing quick math here, probably 20 some transfers since Rule would have gotten here. But it's not a runoff. It's sort of the natural attrition that's going to occur when you have a coaching change. And so who's to say which way is right? I mean, maybe Colorado was an awful college football team last year. Maybe this extreme level of roster flip makes a difference for them moving forward. Maybe Nebraska's way is better, but it's two really very different approaches to the portal. It'll be fascinating to see how it turns out.
Husker Baseball, Evan, able to get off the schneid in state. They took down UNO last night, 6-3. Good numbers for Drew Christo, South Dakota State tonight. And then you have 3 with the Gophers. Can Nebraska get some momentum, keep some momentum after a tough weekend in Iowa City?
Yeah, I think, and this is your stretch to do that in. I mean, Omaha's struggled. South Dakota State is a pretty comparable team to that. Minnesota's 11th in the Big Ten and has been pretty down for a number of years. So, I think the sweep at Iowa City sort of clarified the fact that this Nebraska baseball team is not an NCAA qualifier. When you look at their RPI, I think the gap's just too big to close. And so you're not talking about resumes at this point. I think you're talking about, like you said, you're talking about confidence. You're talking about solidifying roles, building momentum, heading into that Big Ten tournament so you can put your best foot forward there. And they got off to a good start in that regard against Omaha. I thought Christo's outing could be the start of him being an important arm and high leverage piece for them over this last stretch of the season. But yeah, there's no doubt you want to take care of South Dakota State, win that series with Minnesota, and then get that ball rolling, because you can still contend for that Big Ten regular season championship. And then again, you want to be firing on all cylinders by the time you get to Omaha for that Big Ten tournament in late May.
Evan, last thought, when it comes to Iowa City, were you surprised that Nebraska's offense was muted as much as it was?
A little bit. I mean, their offense has been pretty consistent, pretty powerful. So yeah, I mean, to score 7 runs, it's probably a little surprising, but Iowa's pitching has consistently been near the top of the Big Ten for a number of years. They're really good at developing pitchers and crafting game plans. I think I was a little bit more surprised when you talk about reasons for them getting swept at what the starting pitching for Nebraska did. I mean, I don't think anybody got out of the 4th inning. That put a lot of heavy load on the bullpen. And those are guys in those starters that you're going to count on down the stretch in some big games too. So I think that was sort of the first weekend that they all had off outings, off starts. So you hope that doesn't become a trend moving forward. But I think certainly that was a main reason why they came away winless in Iowa City.
Evan, have a good rest of your week. Thanks for a few minutes today.
Thanks, Chris.
Good stuff from Evan Bland. He is off to Haymarket. We are off to the eye test, right? Eric Francis going to join us, incredible photographer for Hail Varsity. Thoughts on the spring ball with him. Hail Varsity continues, presented by Currency.
And now,
back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Thanks for spending time at Hail Varsity Radio. We are presented by Currency. For all your equipment financing needs, go Currency. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel in the stream with us. Eric Francis, staff photographer with Hail Varsity. And man, you want to talk about second to none, the photography in Hail Varsity magazine. Second to none on the website, second to none, of course, Eric does an amazing job. John Peterson also tremendous, and folks that help contribute to the magazine. Eric, thanks for jumping on with us, bud. Tell me about the Husker room you're in right now. If folks want to check it out, the Hail Varsity YouTube channel is where you can go watch it. But good backdrop before we talk some ball, man. Thanks for your time.
I mean, I am a photographer, so I absolutely cannot tolerate bad lighting on myself. So we'll have a conversation later about your guys' setup.
Yeah, me and Schmidt have different white balances based on our I know a thing or two about photography.
Do I need to get closer to the screen, Eric, for the white balance? I'm just not trying. I'm trying not to scare the folks that are brave enough to watch the stream here.
Right, those are some extremely brave people.
Eric, tell me, over your left shoulder, I believe, got a collection of old cameras back there, and I got a couple friends in photography, and it always boggles my mind whenever they tell me how much their camera equipment costs. And I know this is like a thing for photographers, how proud they are of their equipment. So tell me, do you have a camera back there that you're especially proud of that maybe cost you a pretty penny?
No, most of those back there are
classics.
For years, my mom would buy. She would find an old camera somewhere at some garage sale or something. She'd buy it and just give it to me. So I kept them. But up until I bought my new truck in 2020, my joke was always, I have more money in my trunk than I have in my car. Right? I mean, so basically what was inside the trunk cost more than what I was driving it around in.
Eric Francis with us, Hail Varsity Magazine staff photographer. Find him on Twitter at Eric Francis PIX. And let's talk about the podcast. Eric, you and Brady Oltmans have combined for the eye test, part of the Hurrdat conglomerate of podcasts.
Right.
And you have been a pro at this for a long time. So lay out what you and Brady tackle with Hail Varsity.
Well, we the whole thing kind of came about this when we were traveling. It felt like every other weekend this past year. And one night after a game, Brady and I we're just talking and recapping and talking Husker football and sports and all kinds of stuff. And I realized almost 2 hours later, as I mentioned to him, I'm like, if we had been recording this would have been a really good podcast. And so it started right there. It was like, well, maybe we should do it. Maybe we should do it. And we went to Chris and we made it happen. And we've been having fun with it. We've been, I kind of treat it like a magazine insofar as, you guys are on every day. You talk about the timely stuff, the day in, day out, the things that are that we talk about today. And because we go a little bit less often, I wanted to talk about some more generalized concepts, talk about mindset and mentality of not just sports, but also how it applies to life. And I think, and photography, and we try and work in some photography, pull back the veil on it a little bit, things like that. I always get, I get the questions, and I still, after all these years, I get texts and emails from people after the game, like after Saturday, was, hey, what did you think? And I try to tell everybody time and time again that really, seriously, if you're watching it on TV, you have a much better view of the game than I do. Being on the sidelines it might be exciting and a novelty for a little while, but if you want to watch the game and really see what's happening, don't come stand next to me, because I don't get to see formations and shifts and all that kind of stuff.
You do, though, behind the lens, get to capture some pretty iconic moments in time. I'm looking at your Twitter handle right now, and the still photo of, I believe this is Ireland. We were there, and
right.
You have the offensive line moving to the left, double team block on the edge, and it's just a gorgeous picture of Casey handing off to Grant. I think this might have been the 49-yard touchdown run, where he kind of cut it back and burst, and it was all happy days for Nebraska fans at that point. But
yeah, we were still hopeful at that point.
Yes, right. It was before the international incident. We're going to make that a point every day. We have the international incident mentioned. But
yes,
you you've seen iconic moments, man. I mean,
I've been doing it for a hot minute, so yeah.
No, I know, but I mean, give me a top 3 of wow moments.
Oh my good Lord. Well, obviously, probably number 1 would have been the Fiesta Bowl.
Yeah.
When they smashed Florida, and then that was a good one, because flying from when we went from Dallas over to Tempe, there was a guy from Florida who had gotten on the plane, and he just went off for an hour and a half.
Did he do the gator chomp?
Nebraska wasn't going to be able to hold, wasn't going to be able to stop him. And then, of course, the game happens, and then I'll be damned if when I got on the plane, who was sitting across the aisle from me again?
Did you wave at him?
Oh my God, that was a fun hour flight back to Dallas.
Do you show him your pictures like throughout the flight? Did you just take him through the Rolodex of everything you got from him?
Honestly, I didn't chirp as much as you would think, because I didn't have to. Right, the boys did all that on the field. I really didn't have to say a whole lot. He just looked up at me and he just dropped his eyes and shook his head. And we really didn't have to say a whole lot after that. Yeah. There was Amon Green's, what was it, down in Oklahoma, that first play of the game, it was like 72 yards or something, around the left side. That was another one where I'm standing next to an Oklahoma photographer and chirping. And then first play of the game, boom, shoot, runs right at us, click, 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 lots of pictures. And all I have to do is turn and look at him, and he just drops and shakes his head. And I was like, yeah, it's going to be a long day for you guys.
Eric, go ahead. You've been doing this for a long time. And you mentioned
about 30. My first credential was in '93.
Yeah, and you mentioned the fact that you don't have the best view of the game. So why was sports photography the choice for you? What resonated? Because your photography resonates with so many Hail Varsity readers. It resonates with our listeners whenever we see it online. What about it to you made that the right career path for you? And why do you think being able to capture a moment in time in sports is so special?
Well, it was a product. It started off as a product of necessity, because I wanted to get into photojournalism. Mm-hmm. And once I got out of college and start freelancing, I did a lot of sports for the World Herald. I did a lot of sports for the AP and Getty Images, and that was how you paid the bills. Mm-hmm. And then at some point along the line, I started to realize I wasn't half bad at this, and maybe we can make something out of this. And then when the opportunity came to come over to Hail Varsity, I saw it as an opportunity, because I started off my career working for magazines and sports magazines and things early in the 90s, and working the daily news grind, kind of AP kind of stuff. It wasn't as creative. There wasn't as much trying to do something iconic and timeless. And you get to do that in the magazine world, because much like I was talking about the difference between my podcast and what you guys do every day, by the time our magazine hits the mailbox, everybody has seen all the pictures they expected to see from like the spring game, right? Yeah. And so what we try really hard to show them is something you haven't seen yet, something the unexpected, something you didn't expect to see, maybe a way you didn't expect to see it. So that, and then, every time I go out, I'm trying, my singular goal when I pick up my cameras is to try and make something timeless, something that you'll think about and remember back on years and years from now.
Do you know right away whenever you get that photo that's special? Do you know right away, or does it come later?
Yeah, most of the time when I see it go through the viewfinder, I know that one has the potential to be something special. But those kind of images, even though you work really, really hard at them day in and day out, those kind of images are few and far between, because it's a little bit opportunity. It's a little bit being in the right place, and it's a little bit, does the situation warrant a timeless moment?
Eric Francis with us from Hail Varsity, staff photographer. His podcast, The Eye Test, with Brady Oltmans, and that is on the Hurrdat Family Network, of course. And him and Brady chop it up. They talk ball, they talk sports, they talk life, they talk mentality, and it's a must listen to I know one dropped yesterday. Can go to the Hail Varsity YouTube section for that. Also, Spotify, iTunes, Google Play. Eric, you've seen a lot of ball. I got about 90 seconds left here, and thanks. We'll do this again for sure. But your takeaway from behind the lens with this first Springer rule?
Well, I was listening to you guys earlier, and everybody kind of saying the same thing because I think we all saw the same thing. We kind of saw what we expected. Mm-hmm. Defense maybe a little bit ahead of offense. I wasn't prepared to see, really, from everything Matt had been saying, I wasn't expecting to see such sloppiness on the offense.
Sure.
With the ball on the carpet. Now, from a photographer standpoint, I love ball on the carpet. That makes great pictures. But as a Husker fan, I don't love it so much. Mm-hmm. So, it felt a little vanilla. It felt a little old school with how many, I didn't even bother to look how many running plays they ran. Mm-hmm. But it felt like a lot more than we've seen in recent years.
That is going to be that identity, right? Brute force and being tougher.
But I like that. And it's, we talked to
what wins.
And I've talked to when we had Dave Remington on, we had Steve Warren, and we recently had Rob Zadiska on. That's going to drop the next one, and that we talked about that mentality behind running the ball. Mm-hmm. Just that mental shift in the offensive lineman, how important that is to really run the ball and let them go eat.
It's a good take, and it's one that can win in the Big Ten. Eric Francis with Hail Varsity, incredible photographer. Him and Brady Oltmans. Get their podcast, download it, subscribe. It is free. It's part of Hail Varsity and Hurrdat. The Eye Test, Eric Francis, photographer extraordinaire. Eric, thank you, man, for jumping on.
Right,
it's wonderful to spend some time with you.
Awesome.
Good to hear from Eric. Catch him and Brady with the Eye Test. Quick time out. Jock Doc, what's up with Kawhi Leonard? It's Hail Varsity, and we're presented by Currency.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Back into it. It's Hail Varsity Radio. Time for a Jock Doc Wednesday. Nebraska Orthopedic Center. Dr. Brandon Seifert with us. Dr. Brandon, how we doing?
I'm great, Chris. How are you?
We're good. We're both doing better than Kawhi Leonard. He has been a Jock Doc topic from time to time, but man, one of the best there is in the NBA, diagnosed with a torn meniscus. Let's talk about Kawhi and this injury.
Yeah, so if we review or kind of rewind on Kawhi, what he's had in the past. He had an ACL tear. There was a partial ACL tear that he underwent surgery for, I think back in July of 21, I think is when that happened. And so he recovered from reconstruction and, took that season off and was obviously back this year and really was playing pretty fantastic. In fact, I think he poured in like 30-some points the other night. At any rate, was doing well, and it sounds like he had kind of a tweak that happened in the game, or maybe he had a knee sprain, and then now it kind of comes out that they've diagnosed him with a meniscus tear. And so as we kind of go back and review that anatomy, we've talked about this before. Meniscus is essentially that cartilage pad. It's kind of a C-shaped structure, sits in between the two bones, acts as a shock absorber, and also has some stabilization qualities to it. They didn't say whether or not he had any meniscus trauma or pathology when he had his ACL tear. Maybe he did, maybe didn't, not certain. So at this point, we'll just assume this is a new tear for him. And so they're not describing, obviously, how big the tear is, where exactly the tear is located, but it sounds like, obviously, surgery is kind of in the works for him is what it sounds like.
Dr. Brandon, same knee, not that far apart, a little over a year and a half. Is that common? Is it awkward to have a meniscus after an ACL to the same knee?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great question, Chris. No, actually, it can be quite common. For a variety of reasons. Again, could this be something, maybe he had a tear here before, they tried to repair it, maybe it didn't heal. Maybe he had kind of we call it intersubstance injury, where he kind of bruised the meniscus with force, not truly a tear, but maybe kind of weakened the outer fibers. And then as kind of time has gone along, he still had that kind of pressure over the area. It finally gave way. That can be part of it. Obviously, anytime you're, reconstructing an ACL, it's not your native, it's not your original ACL that's there. So you put a new graft in. They work really well. but at times maybe they don't totally control all that kind of rotational issue. Maybe they don't totally control some of that kind of anterior or force to the front. And so maybe there's a little bit of some control issue. Maybe he didn't get his quad muscle all the way back. Maybe Kawhi's got an issue with some maybe laxity in his tissues, maybe an issue with some of his biomechanics. So you start kind of adding up all these factors. It's probably a combo of those things that put him more at risk of having, an ACL, or excuse me, a meniscus injury this close to, having a previous ACL tear.
Dr. Brandon Seifert's with us, Nebraska Orthopedic Center at Jock Doc Wednesday. We're talking Kawhi Leonard and his meniscus tear. So with your work and the surgery, tell me a little bit about the trimming that takes place, the repair that happens, and then, what are some real life limitations he can have on the basketball court, or is something of this nature, once the repair happens, can he be as good as new?
Yeah, great questions, Chris. So as we look at this, there's been a big, kind of shift in meniscus care kind of over the years. First obviously started out with, let's just take out, whatever's torn, or even a whole portion of that, which obviously they discovered very quickly is not a good idea. And then it evolved to, doing more things with the scope. And then you want to just basically kind of trim out that kind of loose piece that's there, torn piece, which then has evolved more into, you want to try to save as many of these as you can, or as much as you can of that meniscus tissue. So if it's in a spot that, looks like it's a reasonable type of tear for repair, in a spot in the meniscus that has good blood supply, you want to try to fix these or suture these back together, especially in your younger population and your athletic population. The big issue there always is, making that assessment of, does this area really have good blood supply? That's always the hard part with, meniscus injuries. The meniscus in general, even in young, healthy athletes, does not have a great blood supply. It's only kind of that outer 1/3 of that meniscus that really has a decent blood supply, whereas most of the tears occur kind of on the inner rim that's, avascular, doesn't have great blood supply. So that's always that big kind of decision you have to make when you're in there. But again, our focus is always to try to repair these if we can. What's interesting is, as you look at that long term, what does that mean for the athlete long term, versus, just a cleanup versus repairing the meniscus. There can be a variety of factors that an athlete may try to tell you as a physician that, hey, doc, I just don't think I can have this repaired. It's going to take longer to recovery. I've got an NFL combine coming up. I've got, an important club season where I think I need to have an opportunity to play so I can get a different, college scholarship. So all these factors kind of weigh into this. But in the end, the right education and counseling for the athlete is, if we can fix it, get it fixed, because you'll have a longer, better career. There was a good study, and we've quoted this before in here, a good study about NFL players looking at this very issue. It was a pretty high-level study, and they basically showed athletes that have like a meniscus cleanup, just a trim of the tear, versus athletes who had their meniscus repaired. Athletes who actually had their meniscus repaired, there was a lot higher percentage of those still in the league after 5 years versus those that had obviously just a cleanup. Now, again, that's hard to weigh all the factors there. There's a variety of factors that can determine that, but it is an interesting study nonetheless.
Dr. Brandon, when we talk timeline here for Kawhi, he's a guy that takes his time, and I get it, that quad injury really knocked him down. He ended up in Toronto, won a ring, but man, he didn't rush back that free agent season with San Antonio, just putting it nicely. But he went to Toronto, was an MVP and phenomenal. But we talk ACL, we talk meniscus now. Timeline for this is what? What's a fair estimation here for Kawhi Leonard?
Yeah, fortunately, it's at a point where, the playoffs are essentially done for them, and he's got an opportunity to rest here until next season. So we're going to have a nice kind of time window to get better. But if this was more of a scenario where this happens early in the season, what are your prospects getting back for the season? So as I approach these and talk to our athletes about them, if you're looking at a situation where it's just a cleanup on the meniscus, little small tear, one that's not repairable, a lot of those athletes can get back in 3, 4, 5 weeks if you really want to push it. It really all depends on how much they maintain their quad strength and are able to kind of progress through a rehab program. When you're taking somebody who's, talking NBA type money, player like he is, investment that he is, they would probably push that more to like 6 or 8 weeks if they were on kind of an aggressive timetable, would be my assumption. Now, if you start to look more at, hey, what if you have to repair the meniscus, sew it back together, then you're kind of looking more 3 to 6 months down time frame down the road, just because there's going to be some potential kind of weight bearing restrictions early on, and your rehab just a little slower early on. So those are kind of those two big scenarios, which is a big difference, 4 to 6 weeks versus 3 to 4, maybe 6 months.
The meniscus limits his ability to do what?
So from a meniscus perspective, short term, obviously if you don't fix it, clean it up now, he's going to feel like it's unstable, it's painful, it catches, it gives out. By doing the knee scope, either cleaning up the meniscus or stabilizing it with a repair, you now kind of eliminate those mechanical symptoms. What that meniscus does for you, though, is it gives you that ability to feel more stable, especially in light of having a previous ACL reconstruction. He's going to feel more stable. He'll probably feel like there's a more rotational stability in his knee. Also, just long term for him, if he ends up losing a significant amount of that meniscus, you're talking about putting more stress on the cartilage, then you worry more about kind of those long-term arthritic or arthritis issues or cartilage issues, which can be absolutely kind of just nagging and plaguing for a NBA professional athlete.
Dr. Brandon, thanks for a few minutes today.
You bet, guys. You all take care.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
One final time on a Wednesday, it's Hail Varsity Radio. We're presented by Currency. For all your equipment financing needs, go Currency. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. Find the show, follow the show at HVarsity Radio on Twitter, at Schmidt_radio, at Herbal Essence for Elijah Herbel. And the YouTube channel, the Hail Varsity YouTube channel. It is draft day tomorrow. Plenty of thoughts on the NFL draft, some projections on where some of those Husker names may go, and we'll tackle all of it tomorrow. Brandon Vogel joins us. Jeremiah Searles. Searles will touch on the spring game, but Searles, busy guy, man. He is all about those NFL draft picks. He is also a representative, NFL agent. So Searles going to join us. We'll sneak him in before the draft starts at 6 and get his take on things, some of his clients, some of his projections. Get that. Gary Barnett back with us tomorrow. It's been an interesting week for Coach Prime. Coach Barney did the spring game in Boulder. Talked to him last week, and yeah, we'll see how he is processing the week that's been. What do we talk about? 70 total players with the Buffs. Their former 4-star offensive tackle back into the portal. Their transfer defensive lineman from Michigan in the portal. So Colorado, I know, was 1-11. They were 130 out of 130. But of their starting 22, there's probably 5 or 6 dudes that are NFL guys. Mm-hmm. So we'll see how's the Boulder burns. We'll see that a little bit. Steven tweets in at us, Dion equals all hat, no cattle. Those are sweet hats he's got. He can pull off the cowboy hat.
Beautiful. I also want to get Coach Barney's take on that story that's come out this week that Coach Prime, well, he wasn't giving them their practice footage to use, and now it sounds like he is. But I think
the AD probably stepped in and said, dude, got to do it.
It's a PR thing, but I've seen conflicting reports on Twitter. Some people saying, wow, what kind of coach would do this? And other people who've been in and around college football saying, don't let the headlines distract you. This is somewhat standard in college football. I think Michael Rose-Ivy hopped on Twitter and said, hey, this isn't unusual in the world of college football. Some coaches will allow that, but it's not by any means weird for a coach or vindictive of a coach to say, no, you can't have your practice.
It's totally vindictive. You have no control anymore on who stays and who goes.
I think it's vindictive whenever you have this many guys going into the portal and this many guys that don't have any game film. Like, it's one thing if you're the head coach at name a school and you have a guy into the transfer portal and you say, hey man, sorry, we don't want to give away any of our practice film. We'll help you land on your feet though. That's one thing. It's another thing whenever you don't know a kid's name and you say, hell yeah, practice film from before we got here. No, you can't have that. That's where it seems wrong, but
he doesn't know guys' names. He's like, you got to go.
Yeah.
And it's about treating people. He may not be wrong with his purge, but it's about how you go about doing it. And listen, he is throwback. He is from the 80s. I mean, no one helped him out. He earned it all on his own, from where he came from in Florida to being great at Florida State. His ego it could be his downfall. It's not that he doesn't know football or doesn't know how to spot talent, but you got to treat people right. And as tough as it is for throwback coaches to kiss a little ass, you got to do it nowadays. Mm-hmm. Or at least you got to be able to communicate to them that you actually care about them, not what they can do for you.
Your image matters.
Well, and that's how Deion is all image. Talk to you tomorrow at 4. Thanks.